Morning, everyone. So the theme continues in this session as well. We've spoken about BEPS, we've spoken about APAs this morning, and some of that continues in my presentation as well. What we are talking about today is transfer pricing in Africa. Africa's a growing continent, transfer pricing being one of the key things that the revenue authorities are looking at. But I'll come to that in a bit. Everyone's heard about the BRICS countries. Everyone's seen the growth story about the BRICS countries in the last few years. Why did the BRICS countries do so well? Obviously, they had the advantages of location, workforce. The governments were ready with their plans. A lot of these countries introduced, or rather policed transfer pricing, customs, and other tax incentives over the last few years, and this is where you've seen the growth that's happened. Now, exactly the same thing's happening in Africa. I'm sure everybody reads in the papers about some African country every day that, you know, this is the growth story here, this multinational corporation is investing in so-and-so country, and so on and so forth. So, why is Africa coming up? I mean, obviously, everything reaches a saturation point. The BRICS countries are still growing. It's not that the growth has stopped. They're still growing, but the growth is at a decreasing rate as compared to what it was over the last 5 to 10 years. Look at the African countries today. There's availability of workforce. There's an increase in demand for commodities in Africa. There's a huge investment in infrastructure in all the African countries. There's not one country in the continent where we are not seeing development. There's an improvement in the institutional environment and the economic policies in each of these countries. And there's an increasing GDP growth, a lessening of the debt, and lower inflation in most of the African economies as compared to other parts of the world. Look at, just as an example, and I've worked in India in the past, so I know the Indian economy pretty well. Look at the rate of inflation in India as compared to some of the African economies. Most of the African economies are hovering around the 6–7%. India is way past 10%. So you can imagine what the cost of doing business in India is. Where will companies look to invest, and where will companies look to make their money from today? Is the African countries. There's an IMF report on sub-Saharan Africa which talks about the growth story in Africa. So the director of the IMF's African operations, African department, she commented while introducing her report in 2014, which says the strong growth of recent years in sub-Saharan Africa region looks set to continue, accelerating from 4.9% last year to around 5.5% in 2014. These numbers include South Africa as well. But if you take South Africa out, which is part of, again, BRICS, those numbers jump by 1%. So it's from 5.5 to 6.5%, which is what proves that these economies are getting saturated. The growth is at a slightly slower rate as compared to the other developing economies, the ones that are opening up. I'd like attention to go to the last paragraph there, which basically says, wherever growth is doing well, there is a need to contain and gradually reduce deficits with a particular emphasis on improving revenue mobilization. This is key, and this is where it all connects into tax. What does all of this growth mean? It means expansion in the markets, which basically means that a lot of the multinational corporations will be setting up presence in multiple jurisdictions. What does that mean in terms of tax? Obviously, the key part being transfer pricing, customs, permanent establishment issues, and BEPS.